what are some of the main things that churches do today that makes former church members or people who don't go to church anymore think that they're cults?
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's,
or that the whole thing is one big cult?
Yeah. No, I think that's a good question.
Like, what are the most prevalent stuff happening at churches that makes people think they're cults?
Right. You know, it's interesting because I think if you had asked me this question, like even several years ago, I'd have been like, I don't know if I've ever seen cult-like stuff happening in churches.
Okay.
Like, that was just my own kind of experience in church, right?
Okay.
Like, so, you know, getting saved, going to being part of a campus ministry, that was awesome.
Is that because you were in one? You were the cult, so you couldn't see it?
I don't know.
See it that way?
Well, no, I mean, I was in a campus ministry. It was awesome. I was in, you know, a church where I was a youth minister, which was great. And then I was, you know, we planted a church, and that was fine. And so, like, and then, you know, became part of another church, and that was good. So I think honestly, I would have looked back and been like, I don't know, I've never been part of like cult-like stuff. And so it's interesting because I do think I think a couple things have happened. Number one, as I get older, you start hearing more and more about people's experiences with church. So, like, for example, there was the big like deconstruction movement that was happening, like, from all of these individuals that were like, we're ex-evangelicals, you know, so individuals leaving evangelical churches. And some of it was doctrine, some of it was theology, but a lot of the deconstruction that was occurring was happening because of people's bad experiences within church. And some of it was labeled like church hurt or that kind of stuff. But kind of when you dig a little deeper, at times it's kind of like, I don't know, that's not just church hurt. That's like borderline cult-like stuff going on.
Okay.
So I think as I began to read and begin to hear stories of individuals that were kind of coming out of those situations, you're like, wow, that's different, right? Even if it's not a cult, it's cult-like. There's some behaviors by the leaders and by even the members that are part of it. You're just like, I don't know, that's pretty controlling, you know, or that's pretty manipulative, whatever it may be. And so I think that, you know, beginning to see that stuff, I mean, you shared some of your stories of your experiences. So like hearing that, but so there's the hearing of these stories, there's the whole kind of deconstruction movement. And then I think just the word cult just began to be used more often, like, hey, that's cult-like or that's cult-like. And it began to be applied to ministries that were like charismatic or Pentecostal ministries that I was associated with. And so like larger groups, like people were asking, well, is Bethel in Redding, California a cult, for example? You know, and I was like,
yes,
never even thought about that, right? Like, let me look into it. And then I don't think I would sit here and go, oh, they're a cult, because I just don't know enough about it, to be honest with you, about the inner workings of their own particular church. But you're looking at some of the stuff going, okay, but that's weird. Like, that's strange. I don't know if it's cult, but I get where people are coming from. And so then you started kind of hearing this word. And I do think, unfortunately, the word itself, like that's a cult, probably is used maybe more frequently than it should be. I do think there's a difference between that's a cult versus there's some behaviors or tendencies in that church that is cult-like, or that does seem to come across as, well, maybe that is a cult. And like, you know, like, so then, then I'm around other stuff, and you start hearing stories of like people saying they were in church meetings or, you know, conferences, and, you know, the doors were being, you know, locked until a certain amount of money is being raised.
What?
And yeah, exactly. And then you're just like, wait, what happened?
What?
Yeah.
What? How?
Right. And so then you're like,
does it still exist?
Yes.
No.
Yeah. Right. And then you're just like, how is that okay?
What?
Like, that's not okay.
Sheeple.
Yes.
Who are these people? Who are these people that get locked inside a church building and still go to church there?
I don't know.
What?
I don't know. Now, I've been present when there was an offering that went through, and then there were, you know, their pastor was like, we didn't get enough money. y'all aren't being good stewards, and you need to give your seed, give your money to the Lord, and He will bless you. And
Okay,
we're passing the things again. Like
send that thing back around,
right?
And I'm taking mine out. Are you kidding?
Yeah. So I've been in a church. Like, I was actually a really young Christian when I was first in a church service like that, and so I was like, man, I was, I don't know, like 19 or something. I mean, like a couple of years old as a Christian. And I was like, okay, never coming back here again. That's crazy.
I've been to a church where the whole sermon one Sunday was the journey through from giving 10% to giving 90% to the church. And that was the entire sermon.
Huh?
Yeah.
Give 90% to the church?
Mm-hmm. That was the sermon. Like, the ultimate goal is 90.
Oh, dear God.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah, and then the guy cheated on his wife and stopped being pastor.
God almighty.
Like a year later.
That's crazy, dude. Yeah, so I've been there, but then like hearing stories of like doors actually being like locked, or like security people going to the doors to not allow people out.
I don't understand.
No. No.
I don't understand.
I don't either.
No, I really don't understand.
Yeah, no, Nate, I don't either. Like, I don't know how you sit there and go, that's okay.
How do enough people who go to that, whatever,
right,
the place, the church,
right?
How do all of those people still go to church there to where it still exists after something like that?
I have no idea.
That doesn't make any sense.
I have.
Who are these people and what?
I know. Well, okay. Because this is, I guess, one of the things I began to realize was that there's a group of people that can really be easily spiritually manipulated. And I think these are the individuals that have a propensity to find themselves in a cult because they really do believe that the individuals on stage are so anointed of God, quote unquote, that they, one, don't need to be questioned, two, need to be submitted to, three, well, this is just what the Lord is saying, because the leaders will speak that way, right? They'll speak with this sense of like, well, I heard the Lord, and He's saying, or I was at a conference one time, and the guy was like, I have a right to put a demand on you for you to give to this ministry.
No, you don't.
No. Yeah, and he was
ever
right
for any reason,
right, and he's alluding to something Paul said to the Corinthians, and Paul was saying, well, don't I have a right as the individual that founded your church that don't have a right to ask for money? He says, but then Paul goes on to say, but I don't do that. I don't do that. And so Paul was saying, he was just kind of using it as rhetorical, language.
I have a right to sleep with all your wives.
Right.
But I'm not going to do that.
Because that's kind of where it goes, right?
Yes.
I mean, because if the leader, and I think this is the issue, right? It always boils back down to the leaders. It always boils back down to who the present leaders are. Because I do think when you get certain leaders in there that want to act a certain way with controlling tendencies.
Was this church that you're talking about a regular church?
Well, it was, yes, it was a church. Like this, it was a conference for this church, but this is a church though.
I don't get it.
Well, because they were always in financial problems though.
What?
Yeah, even they were getting all this money in. Anyway, it's wild.
No.
Yeah. It's
how did no one post on Facebook like, hey, did anyone else think that was weird today?
Right.
When we got locked inside? And then other people were like, is this,
right. No,
normal people
right.
went and go, that's not cool.
Right.
Like, I don't, how does this happen? And it still exists?
Yeah.
I don't understand.
No, I don't either, Nate. Again, I think it's because people can so be spiritually manipulated. And I'm going to say this as an individual who is a charismatic. I am a charismatic. I'm charismatic to my bone. But at the same time, there are people within the charismatic movement, Nate, and you've seen it because you've been a part of this.
Yes.
Who just do not use, I would say, common sense.
But that's so far, though.
I know. I agree with you. That it's so far. But I just think there's people who just, when I say they're not using common sense, here's what I mean. I'm not saying they're dumb or they're stupid or anything like that. What I'm saying
I
is,
am.
Nate's saying it, but I'm not. What I'm saying is that they really are kind of caught up in what they believe is this move of God. And generally speaking, they have such a high level of trust for the leaders. And I'm, as a leader, as a pastor, I'm thankful people trust me, but I never want to be above being questioned or critiqued, right? Like, people should be able to come to me and be like,
your church is a cult.
right. If I'm acting like that, yes. Or, I think it does go back to you have leaders and then you have individuals that just are, spiritually immature maybe, or they're, just not using rationale and reason.
I don't get it.
Yeah, I know. But anyway, so I have seen more of these kind of like tendencies, and so
walked up to the security. So you want me to shit right here? You not let me out? All right, here goes.
Right. This is on you, buddy. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you move your shoes?
Yeah, and I think
just stand there and pee on him.
like a dog.
Oops.
My bad.
I'm not giving money. Come at me, bro.
Yeah, so I think
what?
Yeah.
Okay, so back to the
question. It's like, churches with church-like or churches with cult-like tendencies. Yeah, and so and I've seen where there's leaders that are just, I don't know how else to phrase it, man. They're I'm going to use a nicer word. They're unkind. But jerk is kind of what I was thinking of. But because what I mean by that is man, if you're yelling at people, screaming at people behind the scenes,
yeah,
and then you go up on stage and you're just putting on this fake smile, and everything's great, but it's not genuine.
I don't know how to fake smile.
Yeah, that's, but manipulative leaders do.
Yeah.
And I think those are the individuals that have a propensity to end up with cult-like behaviors where they really are trying to control people, behaviorally, emotionally. Uh-huh. And because I do think that's even in their thoughts, hey man, if you're leaving here, it's, you're gonna miss out on God's revival. And they'll use that kind of phraseology. You're going to miss out on something,
right?
To control, or hey, don't question what we're doing here, because if
don't you want to get locked inside? You're going to miss out.
But don't question what's going on here, or you'll end up causing division, and we'll end up missing the move of God.
Oh,
and,
right.
There's those kind of things, and I think that's the kind of manipulation, the spiritual manipulation I'm talking about, that does tend to have cult-like behaviors with the controlling of behaviors and thoughts and emotions.
Yeah.
And because they're basically they're saying basically if you don't get on board with everything we're doing, you're really going against God is ultimately what's happening. And that's not okay.
That's a cult.
Yeah. I mean, as a pastor, right? As a pastor, I have an obligation, a call to shepherd our people, to try to protect them with sound, by teaching sound doctrine, to guide and to lead. Mm-hmm. But as Peter says in 1 Peter 5, ultimately, as an elder, as an overseer, a shepherd, I am not to lord that over the sheep, the flock.
Okay.
I'm not to be a lord over them. And I do think that's what happens sometimes with some of these leaders. They become like lords over these people.
Okay, so if you were to say 3 things that is the most common reasons why people think that Christianity is a cult,
okay,
what would you say?
That Christianity is a cult, or that some specific churches are cult?
Whatever.
Okay.
Whatever you want to say.
Well, I think that, we talked about earlier, the money. I do think that's part of it.
Okay.
I've heard people say all the churches want is the money.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's really cult-like as much as just business kind of, I don't know, fraud, but there's the money issue. I do think that when people look back, I do think that's like those kind of controlling of behaviors.
Okay.
Is a big deal.
Okay.
And again, as a church pastor, I'm going to teach from Scripture. I'm going to say, hey, this is sin. This is not sin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, we have to do those things. But at the end of the day, like I can't make you, right? Like, I can't even make my own children.
You could try.
I mean, I could try, but like, you want it to come from their hearts.
You can't make your own children? Isn't that the whole thing?
Sorry, obviously didn't finish the whole statement. I can't make my own children, like when they're teenagers.
You have to have your wife to do it with you. Is that what you mean?
Yes, Nate. That's exactly what I mean. And so,
anyway, keep going.
We can't like make our own teenage kids like, all right, well, you're, this is definitely the way you're going to behave, or else. I mean, you can do that to a certain degree, but then once kids are, old enough, man, they're making their own choices and decisions.
Yeah.
And so
I'm locking myself inside the church. I'm making my own decisions now.
Right. I'm all in. But I do think that's, part of, I think when people see leaders acting a certain way, and then, like, man, I don't know. It's hard for me to get on board when like the pastor or who are the leaders are telling me about giving all this money, and what they're rolling in, and like that kind of stuff. Like, I guess just fake. Maybe that's a better word. Like, people
fake?
Yeah.
Is that point number 3?
Maybe.
Fake
I don't know where I'm at this point, but yeah, sure. Fake. Like, the people are fake and the leaders are fake.
Yeah.
They're just not genuine.
Mm-hmm.
And so why would I want to trust them? Why would I want to follow them?
Turns out there are fake locks on the door.
Everything's
fake.
Yeah. But I do think that's probably a huge critique or criticism of churches and of Christianity.
Yeah.
It's just that people are fake, man. They say they're going to church and they're following Jesus, but then look at where they act in their business or with their families or whatever it may be.
Right.
Like, and you hear it all the time. The church is just full of hypocrites, and they're not wrong. Like, that's actually a true statement, because, and what I mean by that is, yes, we're full of hypocrites. Because there are people who genuinely want to live a certain way and are trying to move toward there, but are going to make actions and do things that are not in accordance with what they would want to do. However, there are people that are going to church and it's just social reasons and, cultural expectations or whatever it may be.
That's right. Yeah.
But they're not following Jesus. So why would I want to waste my time there?
I'm a Christian, but don't listen to anything I say. Listen to Joseph.
So,
know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't want to be accused of being fake.
I appreciate that, Nate.
Sinner.
But anyway, so as far as like cult-like stuff, I don't know if I've answered your question.
No,
in terms
you have.
of what people,
Yeah.
Look in the church and they'd see. And I just think a lot of that is that just controlling kind of thing is just probably at the core of it.